Welcome, everyone. We will be giving attendees a couple minutes to join. Welcome to everyone just joining. We're going to give everybody a chance to log in. Welcome, everyone. We will be giving attendees a couple of minutes to join, and we thank you all for being here today. Hello and welcome, everyone. One more second, let these last few people that are joining in. Great. Welcome, everyone. My name is Adam Lush. I am the Regional Resource Director for the Greater Philadelphia region at Care and Treatment Centers. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar on the topic, the January Tree, the use of experiential therapies when working with individuals who have been impacted by trauma. As a reminder, we will be conducting this session in webinar format, meaning all participant microphones will be muted. We will not be able to see or hear you. During the presentation, please utilize the Q&A feature to ask any questions. Depending on the volume of questions, if we can't get to yours before the end of the hour, we will have someone from our team follow up with you directly. Additionally, the slides and recording of the webinar will be emailed to you within 14 days of the program to the email that you registered with. Today's presentation is eligible for one continuing education credit. We would like to thank our educational partner, CE Learning Systems, for assisting in providing these credits through co-sponsorship with the American Psychological Association. Please note that in order to receive your credits, you will need to be on for the duration of the program and complete the post-webinar evaluation. A link will be emailed to you directly after the presentation from cego.com. After finishing the evaluation, you will have immediate access to your certificate of completion. Today, I am proud to introduce our presenters, Cheryl Knepper and Marika Horacek-Kunkle. Cheryl Knepper oversees the growth and management of Breakthrough at Karen, which is our 5-day residential workshop for personal growth. She also oversees recreation and wellness services, family services, art and music therapy, and clinical projects. She is a master's level licensed professional counselor, a board certified art therapist, a certified advanced alcohol and drug counselor, a certified sex addiction therapist and supervisor, and a certified multiple addiction therapist and supervisor. Cheryl is professionally trained in dialectical behavioral therapy, motivational interviewing, and 12-step facilitation. She has presented at numerous national and international conferences. Her presentation topics include women and addiction, sexual addiction and the chemically dependent population, adolescent self-injury, understanding co-occurring disorders, benefits of art therapy when working with a substance abuse population, and family systems approach to addiction treatment, to name a few. Marika is the lead therapist at Karen's Breakthrough program. She has worked in a variety of adult settings, providing therapeutic services to individuals in private hospitals and state facilities, in addition to the long-term structured residences. She is a licensed professional counselor, a board-certified art therapist, and a certified clinical trauma professional. She has implemented educational programming for the community focused on the benefits of utilizing art therapy and has facilitated support groups at the Greater Reading Mental Health Alliance. Marika finds meaning in being able to create a space and invite participants in the Breakthrough Program to utilize the creative arts to inspire, influence, and heal. I will now hand the presentation over to Cheryl and Marika to get us started. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you, Adam, and welcome everyone. Marika and I are both excited to be able to spend this hour with you on a topic that's near and dear to both of us. I'd like to very briefly just draw your attention to this slide, which is the learning objectives. Not going to go in any great detail, but we will be exploring the parallel process between resiliency and growth and the therapeutic relationship between the use of experiential therapies, the client, and their artwork and the therapist. We're going to identify the benefits and the use of metaphor as a therapeutic tool. Metaphor will be a key piece of what we're going to do in this workshop today. Our hope is also to take you through a metaphor experience. We're also going to talk a little bit about psychodrama and the expressive arts, which include music and art, narrative therapy, dance movement therapy, all of those expressive therapies and the importance they have in connecting one's emotions for those especially who can't find a language for what they've experienced. And a lot of that leads us to assessing the trauma that people may have sustained as clients and how to help navigate them through changes. We all know that over the last 3 years in dealing with COVID, we've all been impacted in certain ways, especially as therapists, how it is that we relate to our clients. So behavioral health treatment today is really not about the bricks and mortars of being in a therapist's office. It can move into other directions, such as virtual, like we're experiencing today. We're going to talk a little bit about the virtual world and how to engage a virtual experience for a client in an outpatient setting. We're also going to talk about the verbal exchanges that happen in a treatment setting and how important it is not only to listen to your client and what it is that they may be saying, but most importantly, we all know that listening to what it is that they're not saying and how their body is reacting is sometimes the most important information we need to help them navigate through the changes or the insights that they need to gain to help them become a healthier individual. The beauty of the arts and the expressive therapies is that it can be a form of treatment that can engage all ages. So if you're working with children or you're working that full spectrum in between to the older adult, there are ways to integrate the arts and action methods such as psychodrama, narrative and journaling and music to engage that population. And most times what we have found is that individuals will say, well, I'm not really good at music. I'm not really good at art. I'm not really good at acting. Everything we do with our clients through this modality is really an invitation. And you'll hear that Marika will share how we approach that in our breakthrough program, where we use a lot of these methods. One of the things that's inherent in the therapeutic use of the arts is the ability to connect what is happening in the mind to the body, to the spirit of the individual. And then moving all of that understanding into an action plan. The experiential therapies often reveal behavioral patterns and motivations, therefore illuminating the underlying issues which need healing. Oftentimes folks who have sustained trauma, they cannot find the words for the experience that they have. Speaking a little more on trauma and the experiential therapies, trauma changes how the brain operates, specifically in the area, which is the yellow area called Broca. Research and neurological studies have shown changes to this area when trauma has been experienced. So when we talk about the arts or experiential therapies, a lot of folks have experienced things where there's been that trauma impact on the language center, where they cannot find the words to talk about what it is that they are experiencing. If you have someone who can draw or get into their body and move in a certain way based on an emotional experience that they might have had, or a reaction that they may have had and not be aware of what it is. Moving them into the arts can have them view that experience both in their whole body, but also allowing them to step aside and be viewed from the outside. So for example, someone who may produce a piece of artwork is in it while they're doing it, and they're experiencing it and they're sensing it. But then you can also have it put on the wall where they stand back and they're viewing it. And us as therapists are asked to be invited into that discussion around what that experience is with the client, or how they're seeing their artwork. It's really not about us making or passing judgment on what it is that they've developed and created. So there's that two kind of pronged approach that's transformative around well-being as we see it. There's the top-down approaches and the top-up approaches. Again, looking at that body-mind connection, that CBT focus, which we know has, and DBT focus therapy, which has a great impact in working with trauma patients. And what we mean by top-down is really that what we have up here is the trauma focus of cognitive behavioral therapy allows the individual to start to look at their thought processes and work with altering those thoughts. That's the arena in which you are going to engage with your client. It's really about truly listening to what it is that they're saying to you, because oftentimes our clients are speaking in metaphors. Marika has some of those that she's going to share, which I think are really beautiful. And I think that will come in a more crystallized form for you. But if we pay attention to the metaphors in the language of what our clients are telling us, and we use that with them, it can become a memory that's transforms them in an experience. It can allow them to have an emotional connection. It creates a transitional object in some respects, and they somatically can experience it, which is positive. The top-up approach is really that somatic experiencing, that concentration on what's happening in the body. And we know that the nervous system is affected when someone has experienced trauma. That quick reactivity, that hyperarousal, or that not arousal at all, that paralyzed sense that they can have, and how our nervous system is impacted by that. This is where some of the arts approaches, and in particular, the work that's done in psychodrama, where you can connect all of it together and what's really happening in the body and helping them to regulate the nervous system. The benefits of experiential therapies, just to list a few here, are situational resolution. What's the situation that you're finding yourself in? What brings you to the office today, or what brings you into the residential situation? What is that life story? How are we going to resolve together the situation that you find yourself in? We know in all therapy, there's an emotional processing that happens, and that emotional processing may not happen in your first few sessions. That person may be completely stoic. They may be someone who is not even aware of the traumas that they have experienced until they become comfortable with you. Anything we do in the experiential therapies, or any therapies, especially with trauma clients, we have to really think about ourselves in relationship to them. We also have to look at what it is that we're comfortable with and make sure that we provide a safe experience for them to be able to have an emotional experience. The experiential therapies can reduce avoidance. So if I help you with you saying you agree to do a psychodrama around a relationship, you're going to be faced with how that's going to come up inside of you emotionally through the sensing in your body. And by someone outside of you sharing with you an observation, you're not going to be able to avoid that. It can alter perspectives, that change in how you view yourself and how you view those relationships. For example, a simple art therapy activity is draw a picture of your family the best way you know how, using line shapes or colors or images. And you may have a perspective that you see on that, if you offer others to give their perspective, that joined perspective can bring about some change. And that's really what's inherent in the creative expressive domain. I'm going to turn it over to Marika. We purposely chose January. We sit here in the midst of January. We originally were going to do a topic on New Year, New You, which may be something we do a little later, but it is a time to reflect. It is a time to look at the metaphors that we find when we're faced with the colder weather and the impact that has on all of us and our relationships. And so Marika is going to take us through that. And through that, we're also going to experience a metaphor and how to use that for ourselves and how that could be used in the clinical setting. Go ahead, Marika.
Thank you, Cheryl. So as Cheryl said, as we were developing this workshop, we went through different ideas and really thinking about January and the invitation that January offers us to slow down. If you're working with individuals, whether students or teachers in an educational setting, they come in and talk a lot about October, November, December, where there are all these things that they can witness happening and all this excitement. And January is that part of blah. And what do I have to look forward to? So January is named after Janus, the Roman god of doorways, beginnings, and the rising and setting of the sun. And you see the image depicted very similar to when we think of the wizened, resilient part of 2022 leaving and the new year coming in the fresh face that doesn't have the lines and the beard and the lessons learned. And that idea of a doorway, it's this opportunity to reflect as well as to continue growing. And then when we build that into the idea more of seasons and trees and the invitation to slow down, what growth is happening for that tree, who is resting, who is hibernating, who you may not be able to visually see a quick succession of change, but it doesn't mean that change isn't happening. So helping our clients slow down to notice, maybe I'm not here, which is my goal, but I've moved a little bit further in. So that invitation to slow down, to stop the hurrying, because when we think about therapy, that's really what therapy is. It's an invitation to slow down. What's bringing you in? There are all these other rushes in your life. What do we really need? This is time for you. What do we really need to focus on? So again, as therapists, we always like to define what it is we're doing and how we're doing it. And the metaphor is actually, when we think about narrative therapy, it's the smallest amount of words you need to tell a story. And metaphor are used naturally through language, and there's metaphors that we use through therapy. And in thinking about that, the images that we chose are really about some of those sayings. Someone is an open book. How does it feel when I'm with them? The Atlas of the Heart, Brene Brown talks about mapping worlds with people. One of the metaphors we use a lot in addiction and in life is what ride are you on right now? Because that not only allows us to insight into the person, but talks about locus of control. The images of the cups, the idea of spilled milk, don't cry over spilled milk, or pouring from an empty cup. Metaphor is the small way of sharing an intellectual knowledge. I know what a book is. I know what it is to have it be opened, and a somatic experience. I have emotions attached to what it feels like, whether I enjoy that presence and having someone who's an open book, or whether that's a challenge for me because it could get into boundaries. So metaphors have been used throughout time to express our stories. So when we look specifically at metaphors used within therapy, they shape our everyday understanding. They're a mode of speech, as I said before, and as Cheryl discussed with the brain, that allow us to connect with logical information, as well as to connect to an experience, those things that describe and shape. a metaphor packs a great deal of meaning into a very small space. And oftentimes those metaphor we use, we may not understand the duality of each metaphor. I might be using it in a positive way or a negative way, but it carries both. And how do I help someone uncover both and hold this duality of knowing January might be a very exciting time for someone. January might be thrilling because it's a time to go in and be slower, or for someone else, it might be really challenging. When we talk about metaphor and using metaphor with clients and using that kind of as the introduction to narrative therapy, we want to be using the metaphor that they're bringing to us, because it's really going to strengthen that relationship. I am listening carefully to what it is you say, and I'm holding on to that. And it helps us with the development of a common language. What does that really mean? And it starts to very unknowingly invite imagination, creativity, resilience. It also is a doorway. Can I use this metaphor, and how can I use this metaphor throughout our relationship so that you know that I'm traveling with you on this road? So in looking at the research, Sims invited the metaphor inspired model. Seeing as you're not sitting here with us, we're using the metaphor for the tree, which we'll discuss a little bit more. But in using metaphors with clients, Sims suggests this model. And the way I like to think about this model is really looking at the metaphor as a gift. This is something that someone is offering me, and how can I hold it and nurture it? So the very first stage is hearing and not holding on to what it means. So how are you presenting this to me in context? What could this be? I recognize I have a client who I work with who we've been using the metaphor of the ice skate. So hearing, this is the metaphor I hear you using. And if I think about that gift, then validating that. Oh, isn't this interesting? Isn't this intriguing? Isn't this fascinating? One of the things that we use a lot at Breakthrough is talking about curiosity. Not only do I hear what you're saying, but I'm really curious about this gift that you're giving me. So can we explore this more? And then being able to expand upon it. What are other associations with this metaphor that might be there that you might not be aware of, that I might introduce to you as a way of engaging you with me and our ability to co-create and my ability to want to know more about you. And then playing with the possibilities. We just went through and expanded all these metaphors and all this imagery. What fits, what doesn't is the making and selecting, but it's really this process of, I may be dealing with someone with trauma, adverse childhood experiences, hurts and pains. They may not have had the ability to expand on things. I am now saying you are not limited. You're in control of this. So could we play with it? And then once we play with it, how do we select what's important to you? And clinically, when we're selecting what it means to you, how can I use that as part of goals for our treatment? What is important to this that might be beneficial for me to mark and hold on to? And then one of the beauties of the metaphor is not only what skills have I learned through this metaphor, but also how can I connect with it in the future? Or how can we reference this later? So as I said, an individual I was working with, we talked about the metaphor of the ice skate. It's a young adult in college who he's a very intellectual individual and decided to learn figure skating. And so he was talking to me about teaching his mother how to figure skate, that she let him take him onto the ice. And he was talking to me also about the idea of what it is to be in the skate on the ice versus what it is to be on land. So we expanded this idea of this opportunity of growth through the ice skate. But also I said to him, I'm really struck by this very beautiful object, that's also held on a blade, that's also held on one sharp point? What were the skills and internal resources you use to allow yourself to step off of that hard wood, to take the safety off the skate and to try to glide onto the ice? How did that impact your relationship with your mother, that she was trusting you to be the leader and teaching her how to do something? Fast forward, as we played with the metaphor, now he's talking about continuing to learn and needing a new set of ice skates, and what the skates that he started with could do for him versus having to get these new skates broken in, and what he could potentially do with those. And we've used that metaphor in his developing of romantic relationships. So it's become this beautiful way of us to really talk about his growth, his resiliency, and his abilities to take those things that he's learned and put them into other options to really fully develop this piece. So the tree as metaphor, when we talk about art therapy, asking someone specifically, well, do a self-portrait, that is going to bring up a lot of resistance. That's usually going to typically bring up a lot of concern about how I do things. Are you going to understand it? My skills as an artist. In art therapy, there are so many metaphors we use. Draw a house, draw a tree. Those are much less anxiety producing. So using the tree in that way in art is really beneficial and helpful. But if we think about tree narratively and in history, it's been used to represent evolution, history. It brings us to connection to nature, seasons, the tree of life. Culturally, trees can be used, I want to say more expansively, nature can be used. What in nature? The tree of life was actually developed in Zimbabwe, and using the metaphor of trees and how to work with that. So nature is what is in nature around us. And I really like this quote from London, and I really appreciate that it's drawing closer to nature. The art therapist in me really likes that. Because just the analogy of, you know, what is a tree? What does it represent? And also when we're thinking about trauma, what can I give you? Art therapy is an amazing container, but what can I give you that's a symbol of the self, that's not as invasive, and that we can work within the metaphor? And again, going back to trauma and adverse childhood experiences, we can introduce the idea of environmental failure. How has the environment not supported this tree? What did this tree need to grow? How can we now build from that? And it can help us distance that part of us that might have guilt or shame associated. It's not me, it's the tree. So it offers that container and that distancing. Ralph Waldo Emerson said that parts of speech are metaphors because the whole of nature is a metaphor of the human mind. So really thinking about the parallel process of this individual coming in and my ability to help them grow and change. We could think about specifically the arborist. When you look at the research of the tree of life, in that narrative approach, they introduced the role of a tree doctor. So how can we help notice an environmental failure, no fault, there wasn't enough sun, there wasn't enough water, and think about also that tree is metaphor for individual and group. Is it a forest? Is it the tree? So at Breakthrough and with my own personal and educational experience, I work with art therapy and psychodrama. JL Marino would be very annoyed with me, the founder of psychodrama, that I put drama therapy up there and not psychodrama. When you look into the differences of the two, drama involves more things that can be story related, where psychodrama, the drama within, it's about our playing of roles. And again, if we think about expanding the metaphor, in psychodrama, we ask people to role reverse. So literally putting yourself in the shoes of another to connect with what's going on with them and having that information. But this is just an expansion of the power of art therapy, the power of drama therapy, of psychodrama, and how that metaphor can be carried through from verbal and discussion to more experiential, and that there are nuances in each level, but kind of what the limitations of language can be and how we can work with them and through them. One of the most powerful things that I know about psychodrama comes from Tian Dayton and the importance of that. And she took a Chinese proverb and altered it. And it starts with, I hear, I forget, I see, I remember. So if we think about art, we talk about it, I'm going to forget it. I create the art and I see it, or I work with an image, I remember it. And then we take that step down into psychodrama. I do, I understand. Each offers a window, a doorway into another level of what's going on, and really meeting our clients with where they're at and what they can hold. Because again, the art and the psychodrama allow us to expand beyond language. I may not have the words, so through these, I can talk about the body sensation or the feeling of something that comes up. So this is, I want to say, kind of a laundry list of experiential techniques to say that there are no limits to what a metaphor could do for you, and there are no limits to what you can do with art or with psychodrama, music therapy, animal-assisted therapy, somatic experiencing. It's really about finding what works and what am I trying to focus on in treatment, what's going to be most important. So I included the house tree person and the person picking an apple tree. Those are art therapy diagnostic methods. So if you would want something that has a very clear delineation of what to do and how to do it and what could mean what, that would be something to look into. My only thing that I would caution there is at that time in art therapy, it was following the medical model. So it was very much of this means this. When we're working with metaphor, when we're working with art, the client is the expert. What does this mean to you? How does this fit for you? What's important in this image to you? So always being aware of red doesn't mean X. What does red mean for you? I see a lot of red in this image. How would you describe that? And then tree is a self-portrait. As I mentioned before, tree is an extension of the self. So asking someone to draw a tree as a self-portrait. What season are you in? Let's talk about the leaves. What does it feel to be in there? If you have someone who is comfortable with art materials and you've discussed trauma and that's something they want to focus on, you could focus this as a trauma tree. So the limiting beliefs, what I carry about myself as the roots, the trunk, the experience, and the branches and the leaves are the symptoms and issues. So this can be really helpful to know, oh, your poor self-esteem. Where did you notice that in your life? What were the areas? What were the messages you were hearing? So I'm going to distance what I want, and do I want to keep that leaf, or is that something that belongs to someone else and I need to let it go? The seasonal book of trees is great because you can have 4 images, one for each season, and what's going on in your life in each season. Which season do you feel you're in? What season would you like to be in? The relational tree with couples. So the roots being the individual, the trunk being the two-way communication, and the foliage being the healthy relationship or not. Are there areas of our relationship that we need to prune? Are there areas that aren't working for us? Any of those could also then be further expanded in with psychodrama. So scene setting, asking someone to become the tree and potentially enrolling others or having different markers to concretize. So we use scarves a lot. This is the root system. This is the trunk. This is the trees. This is the little bird that lives in the left hand. Okay, I'm going to ask you to actually become the bird. How does the bird feel about the tree? What insight does it have? again, that different perspective and different parts of experiences. Somatic experiences. What does it feel like to be the tree? Psychodrama also introduces surplus reality. And I can tell you from asking people to play roles, asking them to be a tree, you're going to need to work them into that, because there's going to be some resistance and maybe some discomfort and potentially someone looking at you like you have two heads. But this idea of trees offer us wisdom. I offer myself wisdom. How can I get in touch with that wisdom of the tree? What does it have to tell me? One of the quotes I use a lot when I'm introducing the trees is from Dolly Parton. And Dolly Parton would say, storms make trees take deeper roots. And we could discuss that those storms of life are actually what the tree has to have in order to be strong, in order to grow into the earth and to hold it. So just inviting that, how could I connect to my world, and how could that reality help me? When we want to think about the metaphor of the tree, is there a root system? What's above, what's below? Season, colors. Where are things on the page? Similar to if you're going to do psychodrama, where is the person placing themselves in the space? How much space do they feel comfortable holding? If I'm going to ask someone to become a tree, do I notice that their posture is up and standing and they're reaching out with their limbs, or is their tree down? Are there any inhabitants? Is the tree alone? One of the great things, especially with art, is to be able to have the piece, and as you're looking at it, think about where, and you can ask the client, like, where would you put yourself in this image? And then as you're taking in the information from the image, is this an image you would want to be in? What do you feel? Not because you're going to share that information, but just insight into what's going on for that person. And depending on the introduction of this and your relationship with the client, maybe asking that, is it okay if I enter your image and I feel very cold being here? Another note for using a tree, when people are really anxious about trees, a technique, especially with younger clients, again, your teenagers and your adults might look at you a little strangely, is to ask them actually just to trace their arm and their fingers. And then this is the trunk of the tree, and these are the branches. Some people feel much more comfortable once they have a jumping off point. So meeting them where they're at and with what they can do. This is the art materials continuum. And when you're offering art materials, really thinking about clinically, what is my goal with these and who is the person I'm offering them to? Is this someone who is comfortable with art materials? Is this someone who is going to be very nervous about me asking them to create? Different materials will elicit different emotional responses. So as I said, this is a continuum. So when we're looking at the lead pencils, that is the most controlled. And as a controlled material, it's the most cognitive. You're going to be accessing a lot of thought. And then as you move through the continuum, we get down to finger paints. That's the least controlled, the most effective, meaning I'm connecting to my body. It could be a regressive material. So it's going to bring up those childhood experiences of having my fingers dirty. And do I like that? So really thinking about what is this person, a diagnosis? If we're working with someone who has hyperactivity, they're going to need very small, very structured to introduce them in, because they're not going to be able to have the sustained focus, and they're going to need to know that it's okay to do little things. If I'm working with someone who's an executive and is very analytical, I may need to start them with a colored pencil, a lead pencil, so that I can introduce them to control. And then as we continue to work, I'm going to introduce and try to invite new materials. Well, what does it mean to try something new? What are the rules that you use to govern? What if we just enjoyed having fun with this? The other things about materials is the quality of your materials. As we talk about metaphor, the quality of materials I offer is reflective of what I am putting out there symbolically as far as what I think my client can do and the respect for their piece of work. So are my pencils sharpened? Are they ready to go? Is it a full set of colors? Are my markers dried out? The importance of this is reflective of my respect for you. So I need to make sure that my materials reflect that. And I need to be very mindful about not touching people's art, asking people, because again, the art piece in it is an extension of that person and is an embodied soul. As an art therapist and the three-legged stool, it's the art therapist, the client, and then their artwork. So always being respectful and honoring because it is a piece of them. This is expanding experiential therapy, and this is something that I wanted to give to you as a script you could try. And I'm also going to invite you to have this experience now. This can be something that's a great warm-up for art. This is also an amazing psychodramatic warm-up. So we're going to go through this, and as we can't see you, I'm going to invite you to follow it if you're willing. I don't know what you do. I'm going to invite you just to take a deep breath. Stand with your feet solidly planted on the ground. If you're willing, I'm inviting you to close your eyes or soften your gaze. There's nowhere you need to be right now, nothing else you need to be doing. Tune in to the cycle of your breath, allowing your breath to take your point of awareness more deeply inside. And as you continue breathing in and breathing out, imagine roots growing from the soles of your feet down into the earth. How wide do they spread? How deep do they go? Feel the energy of the earth moving up through those roots and into your body, moving up through your core, your trunk, your spine, your limbs, up into your neck, your head, and continuing up and out the top of your head and into the sky, the heavens. Continue breathing deeply and imagine that energy coming back down from the sky and in through the top of your head, moving back down through your entire body and back into your roots and the earth. Stand, breathe, grounded, embodied, here, fully alive, present. Notice the temperature of the air, the breeze on your skin, the sounds around you. Notice how your feet feel as they connect with the ground. Begin to more fully imagine yourself as a tree. Sense your roots, your trunk, your limbs, branches. Feel the lifeblood of the earth within you. Sense the girth of your trunk. Notice, how tall are you? How do you grow? Straight up, branching out widely, creating shade. Allow any movement to come in response. Allow your arms to express the way your branches grow and move. Be curious about your leaves. What do they look like when they are still? And how do they move in the breeze or the strong winds? What about your flowers, your fruits? What happens as the seasons change? Take a few more moments to experience yourself as a tree, allowing yourself to be curious and even surprised. I'm going to invite you to take another breath. Notice if there are any areas of your tree that need special attention. Notice what you allowed yourself in that moment to take in. This different aspect of yourself, connecting to your roots, connecting to the sun, to the sky above you. I'm going to ask you to take another deep breath. And if you can find a way to anchor that experience for yourself. And we'll return. So this is, again, this can be the start of further experiential work. As the person is in the tree, you can start asking them more questions. Notice the girth. How wide are you? What does it feel like? Is this cool? How much space are you taking up? It could be, let's now look at, I'm going to invite you to create this tree that you just were. It can also just be an opportunity for a meditation, for them to ground, to slow. So we've included some examples of the tree metaphor in art that individuals have created. So with this one of the things that's very interesting to me is the dynamic of the two trees. I would be curious if this person was offered, as you can tell, it's a pen drawing. I would be curious if this person was offered other things and what led them to the pen. Working with the metaphor of the road, there are a lot of rocks on that road. Where are you on this path? Are you going in the direction that you want to go? So we'll go through these a little quickly. This one was done on construction paper on markers. And as you notice this, what I'm drawn to is the fact that it is a very wide trunk. It's solid. I don't see any root structure or ground line, so it has a very floating sense to me. That would be something I was curious about. The energy of the marks in the green, as well as the fact that the top of the tree is literally cut off. So again, those would be invitations to talk about what's going on with that. And also when we see a knot, what does this mean? This was a family tree. And what's interesting about this is that it has a root system, but the roots are all contained. And all of the branches are very swirling. Each of the bubbles represents an individual in the family, but some are connected closer to the tree, while some are further apart. So there is a root system, but it's also contained. So I'm very curious about the growth there and how the roots are labeled as family. So how has the family supported growth? And I'm going to invite that the story and the image might not line up. So what could I potentially learn from that? This image, whenever I see it, takes my breath away, because you definitely notice that the lightning strike is very important and central to the tree. So is there room for growth? I see a very strong root structure. Is there room for growth? Can this tree be repaired? How could we repair it? There's leaves falling off. What do the leaves symbolize? I'm curious about this time. Are we going into fall and winter? This is on a dark background, so you also want to think about the colors of paper you're giving. And when we're inviting art, I start by asking, could you use color, shape, line? Some people, that's too much and that's overwhelming. You can tell this person it was very important for them to put words in. So if that's what you're comfortable with, I'm going to allow that. And it also gives me a lot more, I don't have to interpret. There's struggle, let's talk about that. And then this is another image. And with this, just pointing out, this person is bringing light to the dark, literally. The paper was dark and they're putting the light in. So how can we use that as the metaphor? I'll turn this back over.
Thank you, Marika, for taking us through that experience and the use of metaphor in therapy. If we look at piecing this all together, we're really talking about that developing relationship that you have with your client, establishing a level of comfort, being able to truly be present in listening to what it is that they're sharing with you and connecting that through metaphor. I love not only the tree metaphor, and I've used that for a lot of years in different settings, but I love your description of the skate and that ability to learn to be on that ice, and the fear that someone might have around that, or if you're a risk taker, I want to just get right out there and the excitement about that, but also taking off the protector and going out on that ice means taking a risk. And so every time we are in the setting with our clients, we are asking them to take a risk, and we have to respect that challenge that is put in front of them. And you so beautifully have described that in that parallel process. I think it's also a beautiful way that you describe the balance between the use of art and the invitation of the client to speak on behalf of their piece. Every piece of art that's produced by somebody truly is a self-portrait, and that's sacred. One of the things we often do with clients is that if we see them and we ask them to engage in a piece, say art piece or a drama piece, we may bring that piece of art back out throughout the course of their treatment, or their drama may come back up and we recreate it and then take a look at where are you now within relation to where we may have started on maybe our session, third, fourth session, and now you're into maybe your 15th or 20th session. And that history that becomes part of the relationship is really key moving forward. All of this builds resilience. Really, it's about finding what you have that's inherent in you. Resilience is not necessarily something you can teach. It really is in each one of us, and it allows safe people and you to connect with someone who can help you recognize those points of resilience that you have. And the experiential therapies really allow that to happen. The other thing I want to say before we move on is the therapist also has to look at their reactions in relationship to their clients or their patients. We know that the hallmark of doing this kind of work is we're in it with them. We really are. And we need to have really good supervision around us sometimes to process what this has come up for us. You may see a parallel process in someone's tree work or the metaphor or their drama that hits something that you have experienced or something that you may not have uncovered until that moment. So having a really good clinical supervision support system for yourself, whether you're in inpatient, residential, or what form of treatment you might be doing, is really important to have a network. I'm going to click through here pretty quickly. And I just want to draw attention to this tree and Marika's metaphor of when we weather storms, we grow deeper roots. Trees can bend, they can fully break, and they can regrow. And what a beautiful metaphor that is, really, when we talk about the course of resilience. And I love this. We are like tiny seeds with potent power to push through tough ground and become mighty trees. We hold innate reserves of unimaginable strength. We are resilient. So we challenge each of you out there today to take the information that has been given here today. We welcome questions, and we're going to put it over to Adam to maybe take us through a few of those questions. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Cheryl and Marika, and for the fantastic exercise. I'm going to remind everybody that we have the Q&A feature. So if you have any questions, please feel free to use that to ask your question. Also, we are going to be sending copies of these slides out to everybody who attended, so you'll be able to go back and reference that exercise. There was also another question regarding kind of where watercolors fell on that spectrum. You'll have a copy of that slide, which kind of lays out that spectrum. So to get started with the Q&A, also, if we don't have time to get to your questions, we will follow up with an answer via email. This first question is, I'm interested in learning more about specific interventions using art and narrative therapy and how it can be helpful in processing trauma. It kind of ties into a second question we received that's said, I use breathing and other somatic-based meditation in my work, mostly regrounding, thought, awareness control, and just how I could fit this into the practice. So maybe some tips on how providers can use some of these things within their practice, and how specifically it might relate to trauma work.
Well, first, my response to that question is thank you for that question and that coupling of that question. I think really, if you want to do this kind of work with a client, you're really asking them to start to tell their story. And that's a simple place to start when we talk about narrative therapy, is how would you describe you? How would you describe your story? Whether that's through journaling, whether that's through a combination of journaling and artwork, whether it's just through talk therapy and pausing moments to reflect back metaphors that you might see. So telling one story through the use of journaling and collage is a great modality to use, because if someone is uncomfortable with drawing or painting, they can choose pictures that represent symbolically things that they may use to describe what their life experience has been. And this allows for that, again, that external viewing of the work that they have created. And you really want to look at those, I call it those 3 E's of the trauma work, and the lens of that in art therapies. You're creating an event, you're creating an experience, and there's an effect that it's going to have. You want to add anything to that, Marika?
I think what I would add with the question about taking the somatic experiencing and the breath work further is focusing then on what helps ground. So in this moment, when we take an opportunity to pause, what messages are you connecting to? What's helpful to you? And what happens later that you can't hold on to those? So are there messages that get in the way? How can I potentially through art or psychodrama create that transitional object to hold on to remember throughout the day, to take the pause and breathe, and to hold on to the messages that are fulfilling to me and helpful and that allow me to be present. Because art is a transitional object. It's something I can keep with me to remind me of my strength.
Great, thank you. The next question I have is from someone, they're working in a 28-day rehab. They have little time with their patients and have concerns that if they do an exercise like this, it might kind of go too deeply into an underlying trauma for that level of care. Anything that you would recommend with how to apply some of these strategies without kind of going too deeply into the trauma when patients are in a stage where they're not prepared to do that yet?
That's an excellent question as well. And I think the grounding beforehand and the safety and saying, let's, one of the terms we'll use a lot at Breakthrough, because it's a week-long program and people get little pieces. So how could we bookmark this? How can I validate that there is an experience that has more information for us, but this is the level we're at? So I'm going to introduce this and I'm going to note, where is the person with their emotional window of tolerance? What are my capabilities to manage that? And how can I structure that to, you're leaving my program in 28 days. And these are the things I want to tell a continuing care, that this was really meaningful. And there's more lying if we go back to the tree, there's more lying at the roots that need to be discovered. And also letting the person know and be in control of that. I hear that you really want to go into that, and I'm concerned if we do that it's going to be overwhelming. So my goal again is to slow you down and look at your resourcing.
I think that's really key about that, slowing it down. Sometimes our folks want to move really quickly through this kind of, let's get it over with, let me feel it all and have it. It's really about building that skill. That's why that whole cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, which is the use up here in a lot, allows you to set some skill building around trauma reactivity and being trauma informed about what it is that you've experienced before you go into some of those modalities that really draw upon that, that emotional piece, because we don't want to regress our clients or our patients to a point where they're, that you can't bring them back out of that. That is re-traumatizing. So I think it's really important to understand your client and where their capability is and move with them. And sometimes say, we got to stop and be okay with that.
Thank you.
Process that.
Yeah.
Thank you both for that. We have quite a few more questions. Unfortunately, we are at our time, so I'm going to wrap up here with a few more comments and information regarding the program. We are going to get back to everybody that asked a question, so we will follow up with you if we didn't have a chance to answer your question live. So again, I want to thank Cheryl and Marika for your informative presentation, and to all our attendees for joining us today. As a reminder, this presentation is eligible for 1 continuing education credit, so watch your email for a link from cego.com to complete your evaluation. I'd also like to remind you that the slides and recordings of this webinar will be emailed to you within 14 days of the program to the email that you registered with. A few announcements. Breakthrough at Karen invites you to join us to explore what well-being, authenticity, and connection can bring to your sense of self and your relationships. This foundational 5-day workshop can help adults achieve greater self-awareness and inner peace in a safe space guided by credentialed therapists and counselors. Participants can examine and modify long-standing emotional and relational patterns that interfere with their ability to live the lives they envision. This slide shows our upcoming Breakthrough Specialty Workshop dates. Additionally, we are thrilled to announce Breakthrough will be offering a full 5-day workshop at Karen, Florida. So please see the dates for those events here. Next, also, please join us for our continuing education webinar on February 15th. We are hosting a webinar titled Using DBT Skills and Principles to Address Co-occurring Mental Health and Substance Use Disorders. Also, I'd like to share that Karen, Pennsylvania is an in-network provider with a number of insurance providers that you see here. We continue to expand access to care, so please do not hesitate to reach out to determine eligibility of benefits for your patients. Additionally, I'd like to remind our audience that Karen's new 100,000 square foot medical center, the Keel Center, is opening soon in Delray Beach, Florida. Here we will offer detoxification as well as treatment for older adults and expand our Ocean Drive program. For more information, please visit our website or reach out to your local regional resource director. Here's the contact for your local regional resource director, and please feel free to reach out to any of us at any time for additional information, resources in your area, or questions regarding admission to any of Karen's programs. And with that, we'd like to thank you all for joining us and hope that you have a great afternoon.